Welcome back to some new r/malicious compliance stories, where people comply to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. I hope you had a great day. Thanks for all the likes and comments on the last video. And now let's start with the first story. It's called Never Underestimate Nurses. My mother was a nurse working in the same unit for nearly 30 years. Each year, a new group of medical residents would rotate through her unit. Most were friendly and eager to learn from everyone, including the nurses. But as always, there was the occasional outlier. One afternoon, there was an issue with a patient on the floor. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but it involved a treatment that a resident had ordered, which wasn't working out well for the patient. This was a known issue with that particular treatment, and there was already a protocol in place for adjusting it. The seasoned nurses had seen it all before and had made these adjustments hundreds of times. The nurse in charge made the necessary change, and everything was fine. However, when the prescribing resident found out, she was not pleased and made quite a scene, saying that her authority had been undermined. She insisted that any adjustments to her patient's care needed her approval first. Well, challenge accepted. For the next week, this resident was paged for every single little thing, especially when she was on break during her 36-hour shifts. This continued for about 2 weeks. The resident even complained to others, hoping to get support, but none of the senior doctors or her fellow residents backed her up. Eventually, she gave up and allowed the nurses to use their judgment. Lesson learned: never underestimate the nurses. The next story is called More Details Needed. At the end of each year, we are required to do a self-appraisal as part of our performance review. Usually it's just a few questions about our goals for the past year, like whether we achieved them, what challenges we faced, how we grew as employees, and so on. This year, however, I got a new boss. Instead of the usual 5 goals, he assigned me a whopping 25 very specific goals to accomplish. Since January, I've been tackling them one by one, working on both short-term and long-range projects. I did well and even got a promotion, which was great. Then it was time for the annual performance review. Given all those goals, I decided to write a summary for each quarter that highlighted the goals I met and how they contributed to our team's progress. Clean, simple, and thorough. But my boss had other plans. He gave me a form with 6 sections, each containing 4 to 7 questions, for a total of 33 questions per goal. That's a total of 825 questions, and each answer needed to be at least 150 words. He handed me the evaluation packet last week and said I needed to turn it in by Thanksgiving. After working through just a couple of questions, I realized it wasn't just narrative-based. The questions required data and analysis, with some requiring multiple data points. I spent 2 full days completing just one goal, which ended up being 12 pages long, with 2 spreadsheets and 14 graphics. Realizing that finishing all 825 questions would take me about 48 workdays, I asked my boss if this was really what he wanted. He simply replied, "Just do it like I said." So I took him at his word. I cleared my calendar through Thanksgiving. No meetings, no project requests, marked myself busy in Teams, and turned on auto replies in Outlook. When my boss's boss, the VP, came by to ask why I wasn't available, I explained the situation. He chuckled and said, "Yeah, he's definitely into details. I guess he'll need to come to terms with reality. Keep going." At this point, I'm up to over 130 pages, and my boss still hasn't come by to ask why I've stopped attending meetings. Maybe this really is what he wants. His team lead spending 6 weeks on paperwork. Either way, they are paying me, so I'm doing exactly what he asked. The third story is called Sufficient Written Justification. In my early 30s, I worked as a project manager for a university. Since we were state funded, every penny spent had to go through our department accountant, who wasn't the most popular person around. She was extremely nitpicky, demanding documentation for some expenses, but not others, and was often condescending when she'd have to send things back for corrections. Rumor had it that she kept her position because she was related to our board member. Regardless, I got used to her race pretty quickly and tried to get my purchases through her as smoothly as possible to keep my projects moving. About a year into my role, I was assigned to a project that had been initiated by our director. It was a 5-year training program that everyone referred to as the director's baby. My manager got it started and then passed it to me to manage for the rest of the program. I threw myself into this project, partly because I enjoyed the work, and partly because the director was a great leader, and I wanted the program to succeed for him. I worked with a project coordinator, who handled details like ordering supplies and coordinating with facilities, while I focused on budget, content, and working with clients. After running a few successful training sessions, we needed to restock some standard items like pens, notepads, name tags, and so on. The director had also requested that we keep tissues available for participants, which was something we couldn't get through our regular office supply vendor. So my coordinator would buy them in bulk at a warehouse store, using her purchase card, and storing them in the basement, taking only what we needed for each session. When my coordinator went to submit the receipt for a new batch of tissue boxes, the accountant insisted that tissues weren't an approved purchase. Even when my coordinator showed her an email from the start of the program, confirming that the director had requested tissues, the accountant wouldn't budge, saying the director didn't set or enforce the purchasing policy. My coordinator, who was usually a bold and confident person, looked genuinely defeated when she came into my office, saying she might have to return the tissues, unless we could provide sufficient written justification. At that point, I was frustrated. I didn't want to bother my manager or the director with this issue, so I decided to handle it myself. One thing I'm pretty good at is writing in-depth explanations, no matter how small the topic. So I sat down at my computer and, in one go, wrote a 5.5-page email explaining why we needed tissues for the program. I listed every possible justification, writing a mini essay on each point, without ever mentioning because the director said so. My coordinator, sitting nearby, was quietly laughing as she watched me type furiously. I sent the email around noon. Just before the end of the day, my coordinator came back in, grinning, to let me know that the tissue purchase had been approved in our system. I never received a response from the accountant, and she never brought up the tissues with us again. The next story is called New Overtime Policy. I've been working in aviation AMS as a pilot for many years, after retiring from the military. It's a great stable job that lets me continue serving the local communities, giving me a strong sense of pride and purpose. In recent years, corporate noticed our high flight volume and decided to station a second helicopter at our location. Since we were consistently one of the top performing bases in the company, the new aircraft was different, with unique capabilities, and was managed in a joint setup, a mix of a sister company owning the helicopter, while our company provided the nurses and medics. Oddly enough, this meant we had two teams with slightly different rules, all under the same roof. Our base received a newer, faster helicopter, which allowed us to further increase productivity. As a result, we were always the first call to flights, while the other, newer, more capable helicopter was held as a reserve. This setup created some tension, especially as our team would handle 3 to 5 flights a day, while the reserve aircraft, even on clear weather days, would remain on standby. Eventually, one of the nurses, who had experienced this imbalance, was promoted to oversee base operations for both teams. She implemented changes to make the workload distribution more fair, which was a welcome improvement. However, these quick changes came with some communication gaps. For instance, the two base supervisors decided who would handle each flight, but the new information wasn't shared with me or the other pilot on the opposite shift. This becomes an issue because as pilots, we usually arrive about 30 minutes early to avoid late flights, which could make it impossible to bring the crew back due to strict FAA regulations. If we exceed these limits, we risk losing our flying privileges permanently. I showed up early one day as usual, and the tones went off for a flight request. I accepted it, and we completed the flight without issue. But then I started getting a flurry of calls, questioning why I took the flight. I didn't understand the problem, so I just calmly explained that I was doing my job. Later that day, I had the chance to discuss it face to face with the new base supervisor. She was upset that the crew had gone into overtime, which was news to me, since it had never been an issue in almost a decade of working there. Our goal has always been to get the patient where they need to go, overtime or not. That conversation led to my new approach. I decided to comply strictly with this new overtime concern. So now, if I get a flight request that looks like it might run into overtime, I call her first for approval before accepting the flight. It's not standard practice, and I wouldn't decline a call over it. But if overtime is a priority now, I'm happy to follow it to the letter. I've asked for written guidance on these new policies, but until I receive that, the 3 AM approval calls will continue. The last story is called Don't Help Them. About 10 years ago, I applied to work at a large retail chain in the UK that sells tech products. It's a busy place, especially after 5 PM or during holiday sales. I applied for a position in the computing department, since I was passionate about building PCs and had some experience. However, they initially placed me in the white goods department, fridges, washing machines, etc. for training, even though I admitted I knew nothing about these products. I figured I'd just wait it out since I needed the job and had just finished university. After a few months though, I realized I wasn't going to be transferred to the computing department, no matter how much I asked. My sales were good, but the manager seemed concerned I might give incorrect advice on tech items. One day, a couple came in, wanting to buy a PC for their teenager to game on. I wanted to help them out, since I'm a gamer myself, but my manager quickly pulled me back and reminded me that we weren't allowed to help customers outside our assigned departments. So he brought over another colleague to assist him. As my department was quiet, I was tidying up and overheard the colleague trying to sell the parents an Apple computer, claiming it was great for gaming, because all professionals use them. At the time, we had a bigger commission on Apple products, but honestly, they aren't the best for gaming, especially for high-performance games. The parents, trusting his advice, went ahead and bought the iMac. My manager praised the colleague, even telling me to use him as an example of a successful sale. I pointed out that I could have advised them better, and thought the parents would end up returning it. But my manager dismissed my concerns and reinforced the rule about staying in our own departments. Then came the day for some compliance, with a twist. A few days later, the store was especially busy due to back-to-school sales, and the computing department was short-staffed. Right on cue, the parents with the iMac walked back in. They spotted the colleague who sold them the computer, but he quickly decided it was time for his lunch break, leaving only one person to cover the whole department. The parents, visibly frustrated, went to the tills, but were told they'd need a colleague from tech to process the return. Eventually, they approached me for help. Remembering what my manager had said, I explained that I couldn't help with anything from the tech department due to store policy. They tried other colleagues, but everyone had to give them the same answer. Soon, a crowd of frustrated customers formed around the tech department, as people tried to buy or return items. But only the one tech colleague was authorized to help, and he was busy. The other colleagues assigned to tech that day were either late or had left. In about 20 minutes, there was a long line of upset customers at the tills, all demanding to speak to the manager. This situation became chaotic enough that both the store and floor managers had to come over. They tried to place the blame on us, the staff, for not helping. but I reminded them that we were specifically told not to assist in the tech department, as we weren't authorized, and as per company policy, we had to comply. I'm not sure exactly how it all ended, but I do know we received a lot of complaints that day on review sites about staff refusing to help because it wasn't their department. The managers had multiple brainstorming sessions afterward about reducing complaints, but none of the ideas were taken up. You would hope they'd learn from this, but unfortunately they didn't. Instead, they just gave extra training to the existing computing team and allowed some of us to sell smaller items like mice, keyboards and consoles. The result was more complaints. The last time I visited the store to buy a laptop for my mom, we ended up waiting 45 minutes for someone from tech to process the sale. At least I finally had the chance to give the store manager my honest feedback on their policies. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like, comment and subscribe. And if you have time, watch another one of my videos. Also, if you want to support me further, check out the channel membership or Patreon. And now, I hope you have a great day. See you soon. Bye bye.